We've all heard the story from the book of John, where a Jesus turned water into wine. And Christians actually believe this to be true, along with other gospel stories where a Jesus apparently walked on water and also died for 3 days only to come back to life in perfect working order. Even though his major organs would have suffered organic decay and rot, not to mention the dead brain tissue resulting from a loss of oxygen-rich blood being constantly fed to the control station of the body. The brain of a normal person can barely survive for minutes without the constant supply of oxygen-rich blood, but a Jesus has the reported Bronze Age magical ability to break the rules of medical science and other types of science too, including chemistry. So let's take a closer look at this story of a Jesus changing water into wine. The book of John claims that a Jesus instructed his servants to fill some jars with water and then take some of the liquid to the master of the banquet, who was surprised to learn where this newly created wine came from. Now, modern day scientists are required to write extensive reports, hundreds to thousands of pages of text, describing in the greatest detail how a discovered scientific phenomenon came to be. It is then peer-reviewed by other scientists who test the thesis and either concur or reject the claims made by the scientists presenting the claims. Real science evidently takes a lot of work and hundreds of pages, whereas Bible science can be conjured up out of thin air in a single sentence, and no Christian will dare to question the validity of Bible science because of the fear they will be labelled as a blasphemous disgrace and then be destined for a paradise such as a hell. Listen up closely, Christians. This is where your water into wine story falls on its own sword. We all know the water molecule, scientifically known as dihydrogen oxide or H2O. It's made up of two hydrogen atoms bonded to an oxygen atom, and there is nothing better than an icy cold bottle of water on a hot summer's day. That is, unless you prefer a glass of wine, which has a more complicated molecular structure that includes water, alcohol, acids and sugars. But let's just keep it simple, shall we, and concentrate on the alcohol in Jesus' magical wine. Ethanol, the alcohol found in wine, has a molecular structure of C2H6O. That is, carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. We seem to have a problem here, don't we, Christians? You might not be able to see this problem because your Bible has kept you in the dark from the day you were born. However, for other people who've seen straight through the biblical storybook of lies, the big problem flashes up in neon lights. In the scientific world we live in, there is such a thing as a balanced chemical equation. For example, when you ignite your cooktop to make your hash cookie dough for your church fundraiser, you are initiating a chemical reaction between natural gas, or methane, and the oxygen contained in the atmospheric air. None of the individual elements are lost during this transition of energy. The first law of thermodynamics, which is a few notches more credible than the Book of John, clearly states this in black and white and has yet to be proven false by any scientist or Bible experts. The balanced chemical equation for oxidizing methane is CH4 plus 2O2 equals CO2 plus 2H2O. This always means that a single methane molecule and two oxygen molecules will produce a carbon dioxide molecule and two water molecules. This is a scientific fact. Balanced chemical equations are a real thing and can't be manipulated to suit any children's storybook, such as the Book of John. Now, if we try to replicate the balanced chemical equation that a Jesus used in his groundbreaking feat of turning water into wine, we get something like this. H2O equals C2H6O. Ooh! We have a huge problem here because straight away we can see on one side of the equation we have H2O, water, and only water. But on the other side of the equation we have C2H6O, ethanol. Both sides of the equation must contain an equal amount of individual elements for the equation to correctly balance. And this is where the book of John fails miserably, because water, H2O, does not contain any carbon, but the alcohol on the other side of the equation does. So, Jesus, where on earth did you get all that carbon from to make the alcohol in the wine? Because it most certainly did not come from the water. Christians, you need to understand something here. Your book of John was written in a time when science was not understood and was still in its infancy. The mortal con man, or con men, who wrote this book of John did so because they knew damn well the people they were marketing for their plan of control, refer to the Vatican, had absolutely no idea about the natural world and how it worked. These were the caliber of people who thought that lightning in the sky was caused by angry gods requiring human sacrifice. The conmen took advantage of the gullibility of ancient civilizations and claimed to have all the answers and were happy to share their answers for some good old austerity. And a book they had possession of, because they wrote it, proved all of this because it was written in that book. But unfortunately for these conmen frauds who wrote the book of John, they had no idea that one day human intelligence would far exceed their wildest dreams to expose their scam by using science to prove it is chemically impossible to change water into wine without the presence of carbon. Christians can invent all the rules they want to govern their army of gullible fools, but they can't invent new scientific rules to suit their Bible, or a specialised Jesus version of the periodic table of the elements, which contradicts what actually happens in reality, and there is no middle ground where even a Christian scientist can proclaim such possibilities as breaking the laws of chemistry to suit his non-scientific fairy tale beliefs. And any such claims of supernatural science still being labelled by the hordes of Christian drones around the world as a possibility is done so outside of the scientific world we live in, and this would equate to magic. And we all know that magic does not exist, and neither did your magical Jesus and his magical father, Mr. God. It is just a story that was used as a control tool for powerful people to become more powerful because they claimed to have a hotline with this God of theirs and used that fallacy to justify the most heinous of acts in the name of divine pursuit. Have you ever been to the Vatican? I have, and it disgusts me to see the plain theft and austerity controls over the centuries that have stolen from the people to build a religious empire, all in the name of an apparent God. One of the many thousands of gods, may I add, and every theist believes their God is the one and only God, the true God. And the difference between you and I is I believe in one less God than you do. I have a challenge to any Christians out there. If you can personally run an experiment to change water into wine, I will take back everything I have ever said against your God and your Jesus, and I will convert to, air quotes, insert religion here. But I'm quietly confident, actually no, I am very vocally confident you, or anyone else, including everyone who's tried in the last few thousand years, will not be able to complete this task, because you can't. And your Jesus couldn't either, because turning water into wine is chemically impossible without carbon, as well as other chemical elements required to complete the other constituents of wine like acids and sugars. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and remember, Christianity is the biggest mind scam in the history of the world, and it's never too late to break the indoctrination.